clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst, and happy Earth Day to everyone. We should never forget that Earth Day was invented by the great Wisconsin progressive Senator Gaylord Nelson. For Nelson, there was no daylight between environmental justice and social justice. There was not only no reason to balance environmentalism against jobs, there was no way to do that, literally. If the environment goes bankrupt, Nelson liked to say, so does the economy. Or as he summed up, quote, the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, not the other way around. He created Earth Day to bring the activism of the anti-Vietnam War movement and the civil rights movement together with the rising public concerns about the environment. Well, here we are, over half a century later, and Gaylord Nelson's goal is still our goal. The Green New Deal is what Gaylord Nelson was calling for before we called it that. He was a La Follette Democrat and a New Dealer, and I am certain that if he was still with us, he would have been standing up this week with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Ed Markey at this new press conference.
For so long, our movement towards a sustainable future has been divided with really just this false notion that we have to choose between our planet and our economy. And we decided to come together in sweeping legislation that not only rejects that notion, but creates a plan.
We will build homes, build careers, build futures. This is our opportunity to not only retrofit our buildings, but to future-proof our workers and the planet. It is now this generation's turn to answer the call and to meet the historic challenges of our time. The era of the Green New Deal has arrived.
The specific news in that press conference was the expansion of the Green New Deal to include a job corps to put 1.5 million people to work on climate justice projects in communities. That is a great addition in a time when good jobs are extremely short. They're just not around. But it is also important to keep reminding corporate America and the Biden administration that, as Senator Markey said, the era of the Green New Deal has arrived. No more compromise, no more incrementalism. We literally cannot afford it. Our environment can't afford it, and then we, the people of this country, cannot afford it. Gaylord Nelson started this fight 50 years ago. That is enough time to get this done. Biden started his virtual climate summit today, and that's great. It is particularly encouraging that China is attending, since there is no climate plan that will work without the full participation of both the United States and China. But there is also no climate action plan that will work without recognizing what Gaylord Nelson tried to tell us. There is no environmental justice without social justice. There is no economic justice without climate action. The economy and the environment are not separate. They are together. The economy is, as Senator Nelson said, a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment. And we cannot make one right without making them both right. So thanks to Senator Nelson, and happy Earth Day to you. I hope you're able to get outside and take in, even if it's raining outside right now where I am, take it in, take in the sunshine, take in the air, appreciate this planet. We have a great show for you today. Arun, Chaudhary, and Rabb are here. And when we come back, we will talk to Marisol Lebron about her new book on Puerto Rico, which is where I am right now. Welcome back. So guys, we are in our, what is it, the 15th month, 16th month since, we're going into our 16th month officially of the pandemic, officially. And what better book to discuss the pandemic than the Corona crash, the effects of the pandemic, how it's affected our economy, what problems were in place that exacerbated. I know that there are a lot of them. It is a quick little book. I read it in an afternoon. It was a pleasure to read, called The Corona Crash. It is on our TNS, the Nomiki Show book club this month. We have an interview that we're doing tomorrow with the author. You definitely want to check that out. If you are not a member of our book club, what are you missing out on? I mean, this is I've had a little bit of time to read in the last few weeks, but my brain, I signed up for the 4 books a month club membership because I have to interview everybody and read along with everybody. But you can sign up at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. You can get 1 book a month and you get it in the mail. You get the book in the mail. And you also get interviews and discussions about the books that we're doing. There's also a 2-book club a month membership, and for a few of us out there, 4 books a month. You don't have to read it on the same timeline. You can always go back and catch up. I do that with podcasting. I'll listen to like 10, 12 episodes at a time and then not touch them for 3 months and then do it again. I did that with the Revolutions podcast, a big fan of the Revolutions podcast. And, some of these revolutions have like 75 episodes and you get really deep into the Russian revolutions or the Mexican revolutions. But it takes quite a bit of time. So go check it out. We are so excited to have a partnership with Verso Books. Verso Books is sending us books, giving us selections that are not out yet or just out yet, connecting us with their authors. It's a great partnership that we've had with them over the last few months. We're also about to partner up with Haymarket Books as well. So Left is Best. If you want to read the best leftist books out there and you want to have a community, this is where it is. Go check us out at patreon.com/The Nomiki Show and sign up for the book club. We will be right back. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. I am live, surprise to everybody. I couldn't have planned this better. I am live in San Juan right now, Puerto Rico. And who better to have on? We booked this far in advance, so I'm very excited about this. Dr. Marisol Lebron is the author of Against Puerto Rico, Lessons from the Verano Boricua. She is the assistant professor in the Department of Mexican American and Latino Studies at the University of Austin, Texas. Very grateful to have you on to talk about your book, Dr. Lebron. Thanks for joining us. And you're on mute.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's just, for folks who may not be aware, what is Verano Boricua?
Yeah, so the Verano Boricua refers to the massive protests that occurred in the summer of 2019 and all around Puerto Rico, but the most massive were in the San Juan area. And the protests really started in response to, or were catalyzed in response to a series of leaked chats. They were released by the Center for Investigative Journalism. It's like 800 pages of these chats between former Governor Pedro Rosselló and top members of his administration. They were just full of all kinds of horrible, dismissive, derogatory language, making fun of hurricane victims, making fun of folks who were struggling in the aftermath of all of the disasters and crises that Puerto Rico has been dealing with. So in response to those chats, people took to the streets for 2 weeks to demand that Rosselló step down along with members of his cabinet.
Enrique Rosselló was the governor under while Hurricane Maria happened, and he's the son of a previous governor, just to give some folks some context here. But he personally, while he was in the chats, this is sort of his defense. I just want to put that out there. He personally did not engage with the chats, but people who were very close to him, and just to put this in context, like you've said this in a very diplomatic way, it was racist, sexist, homophobic. He literally, if they offended every group you could possibly, elderly, every group you can imagine. So some people say that, the streets lit up with so many different factions because he ticked off so many different people. But it didn't come from that, right? I mean, this is really just the culmination of many years of protests and frustrations. Can you touch on sort of the lead up?
Yeah, so that's exactly the argument that I make in the book, is that, in a lot of ways, what the chat did was it lit the fuse on a big piece of dynamite. And so there had already been long simmering frustrations at the Puerto Rican government, and in particular at the colonial relationship between the US and Puerto Rico that stretched back quite a long time. But the kind of most recent lead up to this definitely has to do with the Puerto Rican debt crisis, and round after round after round of austerity and the effects that it's had on Puerto Ricans. And so there was a way in which Puerto Ricans have already been dealing with a kind of failed state, with a feeling that they are being displaced and pushed out of Puerto Rico. And then on top of that, having to deal with these corrupt, inept, derogatory kind of folks that were in leadership positions, right? And so, really, we can think about the debt crisis as creating an overall background to Ricky Renuncia and this feeling that the government was not ruling in the interest of the people, but definitely the effects of Hurricane Maria and the massive infrastructural collapse, as well as the thousands of people that died as a result of government neglect, were in many ways what brought people out into the streets. And so the kind of most infamous thing that gets released from the chats was this exchange that happens between Rosselló and Christian Sobrino and a couple of other folks, where they are talking about the bodies that are piling up, needing to be processed at the morgue, and the need to really bury that story. And Sobrino makes a joke about feeding the bodies to crows, right? Needing to get rid of the bodies, needing to bury the story. And so this is really the climate where the text just really illuminated for people what they already knew, which was that the government didn't care about their lives and certainly didn't care about their deaths.
I mean, it was so shocking to see it played out that way, because I think, folks, most voters probably think, okay, well, it's the policy decisions that are maybe racist or classist or sexist or ageist or all the insults, homophobic, but they can't necessarily be that way. It's like the George W. Bush sort of thing. I'm a compassionate conservative, but my policies suck, but at least, I don't say racist things. But they did. They explicitly say racist things behind closed doors. I want to touch on a little bit, he's from the statehood party. This has been a very big topic in the last few weeks, definitely in our show, but, in public, since you have two competing bills that seem to be at a stalemate in Washington right now between the statehooders and, of course, folks who believe in a process of self-determination, the AOC, Nydia Velázquez bill. So Ricky Rosselló is a statehooder. He comes to the U.S., and he acts like a Democrat sometimes, or did act like a Democrat sometimes. These kinds of, if these chats were to take place with a Democratic governor, pick a Democratic governor. I mean, Andrew Cuomo is probably the best example right now, given I mean, seriously, his crisis is bad enough, but imagine this is like 15 versions of that, right? Not caring about people dying during a pandemic and elderly. would people be surprised? I mean, this is so not emblematic of what we would call the Democratic Party in the United States, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple things, which is, one thing I'd say is Rosselló represents a statehood party, which, tends to correspond towards more conservative politics in Puerto Rico, probably more aligned, explicitly aligned with the U.S. Republican Party. But definitely there's a way in which what people felt like as they were taking to the streets was that, like, it doesn't matter whether we're PNP, which is the pro-statehood party, or PPD, right? Like it's all the same, right? And so I think that, what people were really fed up with was really this sense of both political parties really being so committed to maintaining a kind of integration into the United States as a colony, right? Or as a fully colonized space, if we're talking about kind of the complete integration absorption through annexation, through statehood. And so I think for a lot of people, what was really interesting about the protests over the summer is that they didn't necessarily have a kind of status, solution at the core, right? So what we really saw people talking about was really emphasizing self-determination, emphasizing kind of community organizing, right? The redes de apoyo mutuo, right? So mutual aid organizing. They had kind of surge with the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, really being seen as a solution to what's been this stalemate around the status question in Puerto Rico, which I think people feel like, regardless of whether it's statehooders or the Commonwealth folks, the conditions continue to deteriorate for the average Puerto Rican. So that's one thing that I would say is that, the thing that was really, I think, remarkable about the protests over the summer was that really these questions became about self-determination, sovereignty, decolonization, and what it would mean to create a life-affirming future in Puerto Rico for Puerto Ricans. So that's one thing. The other is that was really interesting that happened as these chats were removed and as Puerto Ricans took to the street, Trump was, of course, tweeting all manner of whatever he's tweeting at the time. And, people kept saying, oh, we need to do like what the Puerto Ricans are doing and like take to the streets and get folks out. And so there's this way in which Puerto Rico really set a kind of example in some ways for how to deal with what are the kind of general abuses of the political ruling class. But I think, really the situation in Puerto Rico highlights, I think, a larger question, which is the ways in which many politicians don't govern with the people, like they don't know the people they govern, right? So this became this huge refrain during the Ricky Renuncia protest, where they not only Ricardo Rosselló, as someone who is, as you mentioned, he's the son of a former governor, he's as elite as you can get, and he doesn't like to say that he understands the plight or can represent in some way what's going on in Puerto Rico is completely divorced from reality. And so I think that you see a similar thing happening in the United States. And that, I think, is this space where we might see synergy, right, between what the protests of the Verano Boricua highlight about political governance structures that can, I think, impact politics here and how to view political elites here.
In case we buried the lead, he stepped down, and so this was
yes.
How did it go from? I mean, because listen, like we've been, the country has been inflamed in protests since Trump. I mean, before, but really started to talk about the summer in Puerto Rico. The Trump administration was just like protest after protest after protest after protest, but he was inflexible. He did not. If anything, he doubled down, tripled down on law enforcement and spying, and it's still continuing on at the state level now. They're amping up on that, but it didn't happen like that here on the island. So what was it about this moment and the pressure that really got to Governor Rosselló?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple things, which is one, these protests and marches were historic just for the scale and not just the outcome, right? So the outcome, as you mentioned, right, he steps down, and other members of his cabinet step down. This is the first time that a democratically elected governor in Puerto Rico's history has done so, and done so at the will of the public. And so this is really historic. But if we think about the 2 weeks that lead up to his announcing his resignation, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people were in the streets. So one of the biggest marches that happens a couple days before he steps down is, estimated between 500,000 and 1 million people were in the streets demanding that Rosselló step down, and not only demanding that Rosselló step down, but demanding a different kind of future for Puerto Ricans, right? And so, demanding a repeal of the Promesa Act, saying that the Fiscal Control Board should step down, demanding greater self-determination and sovereignty, demanding a decolonization process. So, the scale with which these protests occurred, when we're talking about, archipelago of about 3 million people, is you're talking about a third of the population out in the streets. So, I mean, I think that needs to be said at first as like what really sets these protests apart. But I think one of the other things that we saw during those protests, which we also saw during kind of protests around Trump's presidency, around the Muslim ban, around immigration, around white supremacy, is that what happened in Puerto Rico with people taking to the streets, even though there was a massive mobilization, the kind of state apparatus, repressive apparatus, was huge. They mobilized. So the folks that took to the streets were really exposed, particularly those that were around the governor's mansion, they were there at night, were really exposed to tremendous state violence. So Kilómetro Cero, which is a civilian kind of organization in Puerto Rico arguing for police accountability and transparency, they documented dozens of incidents of people being shot at close range with rubber bullets. We saw massive deployments of chemical irritants in Old San Juan, which is a residential neighborhood. So having kind of chemical irritants not only dispersed into the crowd, but into the general kind of community there. So we saw night after night, people took to the streets, and night after night, the police were there, batoning, using chemical irritants, all manner of abuse, and with no kind of provocation. And so, we're seeing kind of parallels where in these moments of massive civilian pushback, we're seeing a mobilization of a really repressive apparatus in order to squash that dissent and to avoid things like what happened in Puerto Rico, right, where the folks were successful in being able to get Rosselló out of office, right, through that massive mobilization.
Was that directed by the governor, or was it the federal government intervening, or both?
So in many ways, it's really was the local kind of police apparatus, as well as the local governor, right? We saw all different kinds of police mobilized, right? So there's like the Capitol Police, but also, San Juan Municipal, as well as kind of general PRPD, right, deployed. And so we see it, though, coming from the top down. So, there's a way in which people were like, you have to understand the plight of these officers. They're there, night after night. There's massive crowds. The situations get very tense, and, they overreact. And, sure, right? But really what we see...
at this point, people really say these things?
People say these things, but, really what we see in the case of the protests in Puerto Rico is that it's really orders coming from the top down. So the superintendent at the time talks about, like, these protesters are in the street and they're threatening democracy, and we're going to defend the Constitution up until the last drop of blood, right? And so really calling for the police to use violence to stop these protests and to get these protesters away from the governor's mansion, and to clear the streets, right? And what happened on social media also was that we saw police, rank and file, that were like, it felt so good to clear the streets with pepper spray, right? And, they say they're more and they don't have fear, but they forgot that we have all of this tear gas, right? So all of these kind of things start to emerge on social media, where we see that not only was there a top-down pressure onto the rank and file to deploy violence, but then also a feeling of us versus them among the police, right? That created these really volatile situations between civilians and police.
And again, it was 1/3 of the island that was showing up on the streets. Not to mention the diaspora on the mainland showing up in solidarity that had left. So there's a moment he decides, like, what is like the TikTok of what it takes to get a governor to step down, and then we'll get to what it means now, because it's not like they're in a better situation now.
Yeah. So I mean, there's like, you could say like 2 weeks of protests caused the governor to step down, but there's also, what happened that day, and the kind of thing that's very, in my opinion, amazing, that immediately preceded his stepping down was queer activists and feminist activists had called a perreo combativa to take place in front of the cathedral in Old San Juan, which
is what is that?
So it's kind of like a reggaeton dance. So kind of like getting down, dancing, clothes body to body, dirty, sensual, in front of the cathedral. And it was this moment that was really amazing, because it was this moment where queer young people, feminist organizers, Black organizers came together, and this moment of enjoyment, right? And like saying, we want this governor to step down. We want things to change, but the way that this governor has, tried to erase our bodies, right, through these not responding to the high rates of gender-based violence, through backing the Christian right in Puerto Rico, through not doing separation between state and church, right? That these policies have tried to wipe us off the map. And so we're going to be here, and we're going to be here enjoying each other and in community and enjoying our bodies. And so the joke was, 2 weeks of protest, Rosselló doesn't do anything but one perreo combativo, and he's out of office, right? And so people, would joke like reggaeton is what got him to step down, or the perreo won, and things like that. And, I think that people say that, tongue in cheek, but there's a way in which what we saw was really this sea change of a different mode of doing politics, a different way of protesting, and different folks being at the forefront. So Black organizers, feminist organizers, queer organizers really being the driving force behind those protests.
It's amazing. Okay, so then he steps down, and what kind of chaos ensued afterwards, the leadership?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like there was like musical chairs happening.
The constitutional crisis, right? So like the top two were out, and they're like, wait, who's next in line? And
so he tries to appoint. So the current governor, Pierluisi, he gets appointed, and it's deemed unconstitutional, his appointment, and so it ends up being Wanda Vasquez, who had been Secretary of Justice at the time. And so she takes over the governorship, and there's people were like, don't get comfortable, and the protests continued. Like, so people were like, don't even bother unpacking your bags, like all of this kind of stuff were the refrains. And, she ends up staying and serving out the rest of her kind of interim term. But really what we saw was a kind of, she ends up being governor when there is this massive set of earthquakes that strike Puerto Rico. And so we not only see that there's this massive disaster that happens, which many people felt like she handled that crisis in much the same way that Rosselló had handled Hurricane Maria, although obviously it was a much less deadly crisis. But what also happens as those earthquakes are occurring is that there's a discovery of these massive warehouses filled with unused and expired disaster relief that had been sent during Hurricane Maria. And so there's this sense where it was clear to people that she was nothing but a continuation of the previous administration. She had been part of the previous administration, and that she was even more intent on using kind of disaster recovery as a mode of promoting herself and the benefit of the pro-statehood party. And so people took to the streets again. We started to see people actually taking to the streets carrying guillotines like that they had made, calling for one of Vasquez's head and other heads to roll. And those were quite, getting, a lot of people out into streets, getting people into streets night after night. But really what we saw was a shift away from the massive kind of mobilizations of the Verano Boricua towards more effort, like small scale efforts at community control and community self-determination, right? So saying that this government doesn't care if we die. In fact, they're willing to hide desperately needed disaster relief supplies from us and the people are caravanning from all around to go down to the south where the earthquakes had struck to bring those necessary supplies when they're sitting in a warehouse less than a mile away, right? And so, what we started to see was a lot of emphasis on community self-determination, community organizing, and really the sense of local empowerment, right? So taking over abandoned schools that had been closed down as a result of the debt crisis, taking those under community control, lots of community health initiatives, and also local kind of food pantries and kitchens and things like that to really make sure that people have what they need, because it's clear that the government is not willing to provide it.
I'm glad that you mentioned the schools, because we haven't even mentioned that the Secretary of Education is probably going to jail. She was indicted, Julia Kelleher, and for many reasons, but shutting down how many? I think it was like 300 schools, or a third of the schools at the end of the day.
Yeah, so more than 200 schools were closed, and then there was also attempts to impose charters on to take over, right? So there was massive privatization of lower education, so like K through 12, but at the same time, we are seeing a massive disinvestment at the University of Puerto Rico system. So recently, the University of Puerto Rico's neuromedicine division lost accreditation, right? And the reason why it lost that accreditation was because of these austerity cuts happening. They could not maintain what they needed to keep their accreditation. And so, this austerity really creates a ripple domino effect where the austerity happens, you lose accreditation at the school, this compounds, or at the medical school, this compounds already a crisis where doctors and nurses are leaving because of both the unfair distribution of federal resources for things like Medicaid and CHIP and things like that, and leaving to the US, right? So we're seeing this kind of way in which austerity is compounding these existing crises. So there's a situation right now where Puerto Ricans are mobilizing because there's not a hospital in Vieques, right? There's a way in which that's been—
Vieques is an island off the coast of Puerto Rico. It's part of Puerto Rico.
Right. It's an island municipality. And so Vieques has been without a hospital. People frequently die because of their inability to get to the main island in order to seek urgent medical attention. And there's a way in which that has to do with Vieques' marginalized status within the larger Puerto Rican archipelago as an island municipality. Viequenses refer to themselves as the colony within the colony. And so there's that at work, but we also see that that's an effect of austerity and the failed disaster relief, right? So Vieques was supposed to get a hospital following Hurricane Maria as part of the relief package. And, the massive kind of red tape and politics have kept that from happening, right? At the same time that there's all of these attempts to actually build up kind of resorts and, things that are not—
the tourism today? The Wall Street Journal's article about Puerto Rico is the best place for tourism. 12,000 tourists are coming in a day. I took a flight, and it was like I was taking a flight from New York to Paris. It was like one of those double deckers, like from Miami. I'm sorry, just as a side note, it's totally horrifying.
Well, and that's the problem, right? So we have now this COVID crisis happening where Puerto Rico is now red, the entire archipelago, in kind of the highest alert. The CDC is saying do not travel to Puerto Rico at the same time that we have massive, price cuts, right, with the airlines in terms of tickets. The hotels also trying to reboot kind of the hit that the tourism sector had taken as a result of COVID. And then, this kind of really intense crisis between tourists and locals, right? Where tourists are coming and seemingly given free reign to do whatever they want, while locals are under an intense curfew, are experience intense criminalization for being in open air and not wearing a mask, right? Where we're seeing a lot of police intervention and criminalization of locals. So it's this crisis moment where that's already bad enough, but then you're like, some places don't have hospitals. There are not enough, there's no pediatric surgeon, right? Like there's not enough medical infrastructure to deal with that. And that goes back to the previous Rosselló administration, right? With his dad privatizing the medical infrastructure in Puerto Rico, but it's been compounded by the effects of this austerity over the past decade or longer.
So I'm glad you mentioned this juxtaposition between the tourism and basically how locals are treated. I've seen the buses, the police buses on the street, policing people for not wearing masks. COVID tests are very hard to come by. Vaccines, haha, good luck. It's much worse in Vieques, as you mentioned. But you started off this conversation saying they don't want, meaning the U.S., they don't want Puerto Ricans on the island. What do you mean by that in juxtaposition to this tourism conversation?
Yeah, so I mean, they go hand in hand, and that's really what came up during the protest of the Verano Boricua, was this feeling that the play, the title is like a play on words, right? But it's this idea that what these policies do is try to deaden, right? So they not only like literally kill people, but they really try to deaden the archipelago in a way, right? They try to make it a place that is not for Puerto Ricans. And that's really, if you talk to folks, the sense that they have is that this is they're being displaced, right? There are incentives that are there that are meant to attract folks from the US and other international contexts, right? That Puerto Ricans themselves don't have access to. So there's a way in which, you talk to many young people, but even, more generally, just Puerto Ricans that are living in the archipelago or recent folks to the diaspora. And there's a sense that it's like, they want a Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans. And it's, especially poignant because one of the texts in the chat that is really infamous is, I forget if it's like Edwin Miranda, he's like ventriloquizing Trump, and he's like, oh, I saw the future of Puerto Rico and there was no Puerto Ricans and it was wonderful, right? And this way in which there is a sense that there's an attempt to get rid of Puerto Ricans or to make life so unlivable that people just move to the US. And so there's this, attempt to, I think, create this, utopia that's accessible to everyone but Puerto Ricans. And so that's what the title is referring to.
And it goes back, it's a callback also to just the US government's role, at a time when people were overtly and openly writing letters that were racist and in the public. I mean, 70 years ago, there were members of the administration, ambassadors, or not ambassadors, what were they at the time? Appointees to under FDR, who were white and here and saying horrible racist things about the people of Puerto Rico, doctors who were testing on women and everybody, but blatantly racist. And so there is this you'd think that they would have sharpened up, but under Trump, clearly not. Dr. Marisol Lebron, thank you for joining us. This was a really interesting conversation. I love it. I'd love to have you back on anytime.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. Take care.
Thank you so much. You too. Take care.
Bye.
Rep Rabb. Be right back.
Parties all on the center, left, and left all over the place. And so I think we're hoping to really give an interesting perspective on the growing solidarity that we hope to see and help and blossom across the Atlantic, across all the oceans, because let's be absolutely clear, there is a community of right-wing parties. Yeah. They do exchange techniques, they do exchange money, they do talk to each other, they do have a project. And on the left, we have our factions and we have our satisfaction with being right. And I don't know that we always put it all together internationally the way that we should. And I think the other thing that'll be interesting, I think our show will be familiar to anyone who watches any show, guests and facts and things and learnings. But I think we're also going to be telling things from a practitioner's perspective. So getting a lot of filmmakers, artists, people who make things in politics to talk about the nitty gritty of how they're actually made. And unlike your show, we will be crunching lots of different segments together into one program that we'll put out weekly. And it should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to get started.
We're super excited. I mean, this is, we have all these conversations just offline. Like I'll say, what's happening in Greece? What's happening? You'll be working in Italy and you're telling me about an amazing leftist woman candidate who's running and she's like the AOC of Italy. And
Caterina Tironi. Yeah, we have to have her on. She's now the head of the Young Democrats.
Which has a different definition here, right? So and putting that up against like the far right organizing and the different factions of the far right in Italy, and how when you say there's an international network, I mean, Steve Bannon had a monastery in Italy that he was like recruiting people to run in the EU elections. And these are conversations, maybe they get touched on really briefly or you read about it in Jacobin, but you want to really bring out the context and deepen it. And it's not just an audience in the US. I mean, people from all over the world can tap in and this is a space. But can you give us a little bit of a preview of the first episode? What you're expecting?
We'll see on May 3rd, right? Yeah. Yes. So May 3rd, the first episode. The first
May
one
3rd,
we will be talking.
May 3rd, just for folks to be very clear. May 3rd is the first episode. All right, we'll be promoting
it. The first episode, not May 1st is the third episode. You could conflate those things very easily. I can see how that could happen. No, we're going to do a lot of cool things. We're actually going to have a conversation about Cinque Stelle, who are a sort of hybrid right-left party that spectacularly rose to power in the mid-2000s and has spectacularly this last week kind of faded finally off the map after I think what many folks thought was interesting, either an interesting red-green alliance, between environmentalists and people who are anti-establishment and pro-equality, or a very scary red-brown alliance in which you do have people asking for a minimum wage who maybe aren't crazy about immigration, et cetera. So we're really going to plumb to the bottom of that. Then we'll have an even more fun segment where people are calling in. We have some kids calling in from Holland and from New York City who have campaign problems, and we will help them solve their campaign problems. They're running for things. That's going to be called Campaign Makeover. And then we will delve into some of what's happening in Brazil right now. I think a lot of times, again, from American perspective, we're like, oh, they got a Trumpy guy down there, and I think COVID's bad. And we don't realize sort of the really idiosyncratic ways in which Latin America has evolved to where it is now. And so we'll be talking about Brazil, about Lula maybe running again, about Bolsonaro, and just if Trump wants to be loved, we're not exactly sure what Bolsonaro wants,
I mean, he's trying to bribe, or not bribe, he's trying to blackmail the US government into paying them so that they don't rip apart the rainforest and the ecosystem of the entire world. It's very clever for a right-wing fascist.
It is. I think so many fascists are driven by narcissism, I think is what I'm thinking. And it doesn't seem like it with him. He's driven by the pure evil of it.
Yeah.
And that's different. That's a little special in its own horrible way. And we'll be talking about that. What else do we have planned? I think we're going to talk about the Kuleshov effect.
What was he indicative of? I mean, this is a different New York state. People are like, oh, New York's blue, but El D'Amato.
Oh, I mean, no, he was that absolute consummate Long Island moderate Republican. Like you could set your watch by, like, he was that guy, like 100%. And then, and I think it was it's the turning of the New York suburbs that you can kind of see with the entry of Chuck Schumer, kind of that slight flip over.
Brooklyn Chuck, yeah. I remember Wayne Barrett, and these are Wayne Barrett's words, so please, don't throw them at me. I don't want to get some comments.
Yeah.
Wayne Barrett, probably one of the most famous investigative reporters of all time, but definitely in New York. He had investigated all these people. He, some people ended up in jail because of his investigations. He wrote a beautiful book, a great book called City for Sale, on New York City and the Koch administration, and just sort of how they put the city for sale. And folks like Alessandro Biaggi's grandfather, who's a very different person, were highlighted in that book because he was part of a corruption scheme and ended up in jail. It's just a crazy time period in New York that really never ended. But Wayne Barrett used to say, and don't forget, Wayne Barrett's the first person to report on Trump. The two most corrupt people in New York State are the two Al's, Al D'Amato and Al Sharpton.
Whoa.
He would say that over and over. But he also did a huge expose on Al Sharpton, and it was a different era. It was before MSNBC Al Sharpton.
No. Believe me, I remember Al Sharpton, late 80s, early 90s Al Sharpton. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's play this clip of Senator Schumer, who is not running for office right now, guys. Just want to remind you all, Senator Schumer is not running for office.
Saturdays, I'm in New York. I ride my bike along the Brooklyn waterfront. I'm not a spandex guy. I'm not going at 40 miles an hour. I ride slowly. I take in the beauty of Brooklyn, and I wonder if this waterfront will be around as my little grandson grows up. If we don't take bold action on climate change now, it's going to change the shape of our city for the worse. We don't have any time to waste. With Democrats in charge, the Senate is treating climate change like the crisis it is, and I'll fight for our future.
I can't
Saturdays,
even. I'm sorry. All right, you're a professional ad man.
When is his
break
election?
this down? And never. He is not getting challenged by anybody named AOC because that would be the stupidest move. What?
I hate saying this because, oftentimes we say the same things because they're true, and hopefully that's helpful to hear those things repeated. And one of those that I certainly say on your show all the time is that we need to tell stories outside of elections and constantly be doing that. It's not just about elections; it's about constantly telling. But this ain't it. It doesn't I do understand the impulse to want to be seen in an era where it's harder to be seen on the side of an issue that he has decided it is important that he fight for politically. We can be cynically about how much, he's triangulating on that and how much he is not. But the point of it is that engaging in politics outside of politics gives you the non-politics bump. This is just the most overcut, horrible, hackneyed political ad. Yeah. Makes him look weak and weird.
Yeah. The spandex line. The spandex line was very strange. I think if I were going to cut an ad
in all the wrong places while he's talking about the spandex, which is
okay,
a huge mistake.
Let's play a game called Let's Pitch an Ad to the Schumer campaign. And 30-second ad. I have mine, and I'll give you a second to think. Mine's very simple. So Senator Schumer, let's not forget, wins overwhelmingly, right? Who is his base that he's trying to win over right now? It's always, you're sitting there and it's like, well, what is the point of this? Is he losing a little bit of a base? Is he trying to prevent somebody from running to the left? Obviously, this happened on, they released this on Earth Day, he's for the environment, whatever. But who is his base? And my theory is he's got to keep the white ladies happy. The white ladies.
The suburban white ladies.
Suburban white ladies, the Upper West Side white ladies, the Move On white ladies, the Brooklyn white ladies.
But not the Buffalo white ladies. They don't give a shit about this ad.
No, those are Trumpsters. As I say, I grew up in Buffalo. I can say it. Okay, guys? I don't want to hear your effing shit. I grew up as a white lady in Buffalo. I know the white ladies of Buffalo. They all got the Karen haircuts still, and they drink whatever that drink was they drank during Sex and the City. All right, this is my ad. Senator Schumer is known for being a matchmaking. Many people in his Senate office have gotten married because he has matchmaked them and outside. That's literally the ad. When are you going to find me a boyfriend?
Oh my God,
and he pulled me aside and he goes, wait, let's talk about this. I said, well, I was your intern. And I feel like I was really, granted I was underage, but I feel like I didn't get the full internship experience. And he's hang on. We got to figure this out. And of course, nothing came. But it shows, as much as we're joking about it, shows he's good with people. It shows.
And it's self-deprecating in a sort of comfortable New Yorkish way. That's good. My ad also plays on that. Which is famously the most dangerous place in Washington is between Chuck Schumer and a camera. Filming in Albany, and the senators often will come along with the president when he because I was filming the whole rope line to put in West Wing Week, and I was like, and there's Chuck Schumer again.
Stands, power, and he's progressive. Why can't you stand up to Joe Manchin, Chuck? Why can't you stand up to Kirsten Sinema, Chuck? Who's really holding things up now, Chuck? What kind of leader are you? Like, make him look weak. Make him look like he doesn't have the
what
cojones.
kind of leader are you? And we can see like this and like Joe Manchin,
Yeah.
You know, just a slow motion where he seems smug because it's slow motion.
Can't keep your house in order, Senate in order. And then like just have him juxtaposed with like Nancy Pelosi by an ice cream truck or something. One of those, he needs his ice cream moment. And he is smart.
You can't solve a problem like Joe Manchin. You can't solve a problem like climate change.
Perfect. That's it. Dorsey thinks this ad looks like a Viagra commercial. It probably was.
Because it's so cutty. It's strange, like how many shots are in it, which must mean and the reason you do that is when your shots aren't good. So it must have sort of been awkward and bad.
Is that really what it is? Is that a secret that we don't know about in the ad world?
I think that this was, I think the fact that this is so means that like shooting didn't go that smoothly.
Interesting. Okay, so we've talked enough about Chuck Schumer. Rabb is having internet issues because he's probably across the street. But I do want to, before we run, I do want to touch on this Postal Service story because it kind of freaks me out. You know, as we're sitting here defending the Postal Service and the postal workers, and the union is a great union. Simultaneously, there's this story that breaks saying that the Postal Service is covertly collecting data on people's social media posts. Now, like, okay, what does that mean? Well, turns out there's an arm of the Postal Service. Of course, right? This is law enforcement arm.
I don't know what they do, but no, you see them in DC every now and then, like in a car. They have like 2 cars, you know?
They have 2 cars, you said?
Yeah, like you'll see like a car that's marked like the postal police hanging out outside like the postal like service headquarters or whatever, and you're like, whoa, they have their own police force.
So I'm curious, and I don't know enough about this, and I guess we'll just have to look into it. If the postal police it's a different union from the regular postal workers, and if they're part of the police union, because this is insane. And I mean, I'm not really sure how this is even legal or what it falls under, but the details of the surveillance effort, this is in Yahoo News, known as ICOP, literally you can't make this up, Internet Covert Operations Program. They have not been made public, right? But they're trolling through social media sites to look for what they deem as inflammatory. And this is including planned protests that are happening, especially internationally and domestic. I mean, I'm very curious, like, is this, they say that they're looking at Parler, and of course, Parler is back on Apple. I don't know if you guys know, but it's back on iTunes.
Parler's back.
Parler is back. Parler's back. Welcome back.
Parler.
Welcome back. Yes. And Glenn Greenwald, of course, in opportune time says,
quixotic fashion.
Yes. Just, these are the issues that we have to prioritize defending Parler. There are a lot of problems in this country, guys. A lot that do, by the way, impede on free speech and civil rights. I'm going to say Parler defense, probably not the most important one to go and put your energy into. But I mean, what's your take on this? This is the Biden administration. Are they just becoming sneakier?
It is evolving as we speak. Number one, Democrats love spending money on needless surveillance stuff. So I don't like them sort of, getting wind of this program or using it, any of those things. I don't think it matters who is in office. We have a national security state that, knows no bounds. But coincidentally, and it's only been a quick Google search, it seems like this division of the Postal Service was formed, interestingly, in 1971, probably at the height of COINTELPRO, stuff and people worrying about Vietnam records, besides civil rights activists. I'm saying nothing of that. So I do think that this is one of those things that was birthed with a nefarious notion in mind. And I would challenge anyone to say what we do need these things for, right?
Also, instead of saying, were they going through your mail? That's the other, back then,
it certainly sounds like it. It sounds like going through your mail. And that is just one of those basic things in America that you don't have to dig down too far for people to be like, hey, that seems wrong. I'm not into that.
Unreal. Unbelievable. Well, I can't wait for Josh Hawley to take it on.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
I'm sure that's going to happen. Champion of civil rights. Arun Chaudhary, host of The Committee, excited about this. It airs, when's the first episode's on
May 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
May 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, you will be on the week before to promote it more. We'll do some teasers because you're going to pre-tape some of this stuff. And I'm really excited also because it's right after May Day. So I'm sure there's going to be elements of that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or Labor Day, as we call it in Europe. We don't play that nonsense, making up a fake Labor Day to defang the whole thing, you know?
We do too here, guys. Just to remind everybody, you are in Berlin. So that's another aspect that's pretty powerful. Arun, always a pleasure. We will see you next week. And in the meantime, just set your clocks because we're going to have a Monday show, guys. I know a lot of you complain that there's nothing on Monday. Well, guess what? We've been working on this. It's been a secret. Ding, ding, boom. All right, Arun, take care. Thanks. Bye. Okay, who do we have some shout outs for? I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to remind everybody. We check out the super chats at the end. I'm so bad at this, but definitely in the future, we run through the super chats at the end. Some people mention why we don't do it during the show. Just, you know, I'm not that great at it. Let's just be honest. I don't check the chat as often as I'd like. All right. So there are, this is interesting turn of events. We've got some Andrew Yang people who really want to get my attention. Listen, if you want me to be saying pro Andrew Yang things on air, then send us that Andrew Yang money. We know he's got it. Okay, so Abdul Anas says Andrew Yang will be the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York City. I don't know about that yet. I think there's some machinations happening behind the scenes, which I also don't agree with, but like there's some stuff happening. Well, we're going to do a couple of specials on the mayoral election. People are asking. I believe in doing the most detailed, thoughtful show as possible on the election. And now as we're seeing different alliances line, because this is a ranked choice election for mayor, as we're seeing new polls come out, 50% of New Yorkers that are likely voters are still undecided. It's ranked choice. Some of the polling doesn't even indicate how people would vote in the ranked choice. It's more just who your first choices are. So we're going to touch on this a bunch. I know not everybody's from New York, but it obviously has deep implications, and it's the only campaign in town right now. And it's Andrew Yang. It's just fun. It's a lot of fun. There's other folks too that are fun to talk about if you're a New Yorker, but I don't know if everybody else finds it as interesting as I do. So we will do a couple specials. We promise to give you a heads up. The election is in 2 months, just a little bit over 2 months. So we have a little bit of time, but we're definitely going to do a few specials on the mayoral race. And for those of you who keep harassing me, I am not endorsing anybody. I think I've decided I am not endorsing anybody. I'm just not in love with any of the candidates. I know Dorsey, do you want to come on camera and talk about who you're voting for? You don't have to. You can do sound if you want.
Definitely not yet.
Oh, you're not ready to endorse the candidate?
I'm not ready to endorse, but I'm leaning towards somebody with a more managerial attitude. Just put it that way.
That is, now you're leaving people on the edge of their seats because they're going to think, what are you going to vote for Ray McGuire from Citibank, or is it going to be some other? I think you guys are going to be really surprised by who he's leaning towards because I thought it was brilliant.
We got a lot of time left, so I'm not,
Okay.
We'll wait until, I mean, there's the NBA playoffs are coming up soon, and the New York mayor's race it's coming out. So it's kind of like, nothing's quite settled on either one of them. So I'm
hedging your bets. Yeah.
I'm a free agent on all fronts.
We can't forget last time. I mean, there were Anthony Weiner was in the race, and then that thing blew up, and then that kind of created an opening for Bill de Blasio, and then he had his amazing Tale of Two Cities ad done by my friend Bill Hires, who does great ad work. He did Randy Bryce's ads, and it was just so things happen. And that like we were in a completely different place 2 months ago. So maybe 2 months before the election last time, maybe what we'll do is we'll talk about, okay, at this stage in the last mayoral election, at least the last big one, where were we? What were the dynamics? Granted, ranked choice voting did not exist then. So anywho, all right. Prairie Fire Kowalski sends his love. Thank you, Prairie Fire Kowalski, as always. And JKR Dozer, also, thank you for the love in the super chat. Pete from Oakland says, oh God, you want me to speak Spanish? Okay. Tienes que visitar Barranquitas durante tus viajes en Puerto Rico. Las vistas por las montañas son indescribables. Okay. Thank you, Pete from Oakland. I will go to Barranquitas. I think I've actually been to Barranquitas. I'm not sure. Just check it out. But thank you. Oh, no. Is there more Spanish? No. Okay. He sent another super chat. I was like, Don't put me on the spot. I had dinner with someone yesterday, and sometimes I get nervous speaking other languages in front of people who are natives. Not always. Also, give me more alcohol and I am great. But if I have no choice, like when I was in Guatemala, I had to speak Spanish. Like I went with, I think I talked about Cesar and he didn't speak any English. And so it forced me. And I was like, I am so much better at Spanish than I think. Maybe it's because I never want to speak in front of people who also speak English. So thank you, Pete, for pushing me. He also says regarding the book club, I'm still waiting to receive my first book. Huh. Okay, let's go investigate that. I'm sorry, Pete. We will check that out and figure out what's happening. Because we work with the publisher. So I'm gonna figure out what's happening. I apologize for that. But you'll get it. No matter what, you will get the books. You just might get like 30 of them at once. Ian Kinsel, sorry, Andrew Yang people. If you want to hear nice things, you have to outbid me first. Come on, somebody send $10. I love that. Can we do a bidding war? The debates? Oh, I love this. I'll just debate the chats. Kowalski from Nebraska says, so I'm posting farm stuff short videos from my YouTube channel, hoping to post videos daily to show what modern agriculture looks like. We'll eventually do longer stuff soon. Left is best. That's really cool, especially with our Sunset Lake CBD. You know, they're creating sustainable agriculture as a small farm. They're, you know, the company is owned by the workers. They're paying livable wages, $15 an hour. They invest in leftist shows. So I think that's a very cool, it's a nice strategy. All right, everybody, all of our moderators and shout outs, let's do this. We've got Midi Docs, Mario C, and everyone else who's in there working those algorithms. Thank you to our YouTube mods, Bob C, Choke in the Orb, and Chuck Diesel. Again, the trolls were out. So thank you for getting us through it. Are they mainly Yang trolls? Are they like crypto trolls? I'm really curious. Are they FTV trolls? Are they Joe Rogan trolls? I'm just thinking of all the people who don't like me. You know, we don't get Hillary Clinton trolls. That they have not invaded, as far as I know, they're not on YouTube. Thank you to Dorian Sapiens and Difficult Truth, Nug Wrangler, and our means on Twitch for keeping our live chats chill. Nice and chill. We will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Femme Friday. Right here, we're going to do a special little segment on Kirsten Cinema. It's going to be hot. You guys have been asking for it, and we're doing it. We are doing it. So you definitely want to check us out tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, on Twitch, on YouTube, and of course, to all of our patrons, we love you. You are what make this show spirited and alive, and of course, our super chats as well. We will see you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity.
Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system. Unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue. Talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.